Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Hillett, your host. Thanks so much for being here with us. Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour for Open Forum. Next hour it'll be Jim Blackburn. Open Forum means you can call with any question you've got. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. It doesn't just mean you can call with any question you've got. It means anyone can call as well. You don't have to be Catholic. If you are a non-Catholic Christian, if you are a non-Christian person, if you are I don't know if there's any more people left, but anybody's welcome to call with any question at all, whether it's about the Pope, the saints, the Bible, the sacraments, maybe you got a moral question, a philosophical question, any of the above, welcome. And Jimmy's here, so you can also ask, in addition to the things I've listed, anything else. 888-318-7884. Oh, I don't know why I said Jim Blackburn. It's Tom Nash, second hour. I said that wrong. Tom Nash will be with us.
I think it's Jim Blackburn next week, second hour.
You know that happens to me when I record the ads for next week. Mm-hmm. Then I get I think I'm in the week that I record the ads for.
Like Billy Pilgrim, you become unstuck in time.
And it happens really easily. Where sometimes I'll come to the studio and I'll be like, why are you here? Just whoever's here. And they're like, I'm on today. And I was expecting somebody else.
Well, they say that childhood memories can help you, center yourself. So I have something to help you recenter yourself in time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So you may remember...
Childhood memory coming.
You may remember that that a while back we discussed Necco wafers here on the show, which I did not know about at all growing up in Arkansas because they're not an Arkansas thing. But you grew up in Boston, and they're apparently a Boston thing. So
they're made in Cambridge.
Here are some Necco wafers.
Wafers. Thank you,
and
Jimmy.
Here are some chocolate Necco wafers.
Oh. Don't tell anybody about these.
And we also once a while ago I had mentioned a candy bar from my youth, a Zero bar. Yeah. And you went out and found one and brought it in. Yeah. So I thought it would be nice to give you these. Jimmy.
Remember that time you told me about a cherry candy?
Cherry mash. Yeah.
Cherry mash, but I had never heard of it. And then we had it on the air one time.
Yeah. Those are really good.
I like the candy part of our relationship. I really that's a good bonus. 888-318-7884, our number. Jimmy is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. He's the author of The Bible is a Catholic Book and a whole bunch of other books, and he's the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. And it being Thursday, we are just hours away from the latest episode, which is about...
It's part 2 of the Son of Sam killings from the 1970s, and we're going to be presenting evidence that David Berkowitz did not act alone, and we're going to be talking about who some of the other trigger people were.
All passed on now, right? I think the others.
No,
maybe not.
We don't know that they're all passed on. But he would only name ones who had passed on.
Oh, right.
And I don't do true crime too often on the show because it can be a little disturbing. But we keep it clinical. This is very clinical.
Yeah.
And then next week we're going back to a perfectly more ordinary story about a man who went into a coma and saw the 40th century.
That I am so looking forward to.
Yeah.
I'm so looking forward to the 40th century. See if The Simpsons is still running.
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Did you check on that?
By that point, it'll have merged with Futurama.
888-318-7884, the number 888-31-TRUTH. Already lines filling up, Jimmy. I think we better head to Amarillo, Texas.
Okay.
Listening on the Catholic Answers app. Jason in Amarillo, you are up first. Hang on, Jason. I'm having a little button problem here. And it's working now. Go ahead, Jason, with your question for Jimmy.
Jimmy and Cy, how are you doing today, guys?
Really well, thank you. You're a little hard to hear, though. Get right up on the phone.
Okay, I'm outside and the West Texas wind is blowing. Let me go right back inside. Okay. Jimmy and Cy, how are y'all doing?
Very, very well, thank you.
Doing good. Jimmy, I had a question for you. I've been listening to your responses as far as when it comes to proving saints and saying, okay, well, I guess, we know saints are real by their miracles, yada, yada, the church teaches. I know all that. I'm a cradle Catholic. But what I want to do, Jimmy, if you don't mind, is flip it on the other side of the coin. How do we know if people are in hell? If we know people are in heaven by saints, how do we know, for instance, instance, as an example, Judas Iscariot. Now, it's not looking very well for him, but do we know people are in hell? That's my question.
So based on various statements that that Jesus makes in the Gospels, it is church teaching that there are certain people in hell. Now, this teaching seems to be rather tentative. If you look at the way, for example, it was handled during the reigns of John Paul II and Benedict XVI, they're actually fairly tentative about that, but it is still part of church teaching. When it comes to specific individuals, there are statements that Jesus makes in the New Testament that many have interpreted as indicating that Judas is in hell, but those same statements can be taken in other ways. Because, for example, as I've mentioned here on the show, as Cy will remember, Matthew flat out says that Judas repented. So, does that mean he had effectual repentance that resulted in his salvation? Maybe, maybe not, but it is an extra point of data that needs to be taken into consideration. Pope Benedict said that we don't know that Judas is in hell, that's a subject we really need to leave to God. And as you said, Jason, it may not look good for Judas, but that doesn't mean that it's certain that he's not in heaven, and consequently, we don't know. Having said that, or at least that's the attitude of Benedict XVI and various other folks, in terms of how we would know if someone is in hell, it would only be possible if God allowed it, if God somehow allowed us to know it. And that could happen a number of ways. One way it could happen is if God authorized an apparition of, say, the Virgin Mary or some other saint to tell us the matter. In that case, that would be evidence that some particular individual is in hell. Another possibility is one that St. Thomas Aquinas explores, at least briefly, in the Summa Theologiae. He talks about the different kinds of spirits that God could allow to manifest to us here on earth. And he, of course, acknowledges that the saints can manifest to us. He also acknowledges that people in purgatory can manifest to us by God's will. And he says if God permits it, even a damned soul could manifest to people here on earth. And so if that happened, if Jacob Marley shows up to Ebenezer Scrooge and says, you better repent or you're going to end up the same way I did, well, that would again be evidence that Jacob Marley is in hell. Having said that, private revelations are not the same as the public revelation we find in Scripture. They don't require the same kind of assent. And so even in the case of a private revelation, including a private revelation of a damned soul, it wouldn't provide conclusive evidence. And in particular, if you have what you think is a damned soul manifesting to you, well, it may be, but it also could be something else, including a demon impersonating a damned soul, because it's always demons.
Only when it's not
aliens. Yeah. It's always aliens and it's always demons.
Hey, thanks for starting us off from the West Texas winds there, Jason. Appreciate it. The number here is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. It's open forum. You are welcome to call with any question you've got for Jimmy. And Alliteration August, the August avalanche of alliteration.
There you
continues.
go.
I forgot what it was for a second there. Triple Threat Thursday. We've been bringing you great alliterative deals all month long, but with some of the promotions are coming to an end. So don't miss out. Today is our final Triple Threat Thursday at shop.catholic.com, and we want you to come over and take advantage of the store-wide savings. Just spend $33 or more and enter promo code TRIPLE at checkout. And just like that, 33% of everything in your cart is discounted. You get 33% off everything. Shop.catholic.com. Use the promo code TRIPLE till midnight tonight, Hawaii time, and you get that 1/3 off.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you ready to spread your wings? Wings is the weekly newsletter that's packed with exclusive news, program information, features, and updates of all that's going on at the Global Catholic Network. To sign up, go to EWTN.com, click subscribe, enter your name and email address, and you'll start getting your wings every week. Get your wings today. It's the weekly newsletter from EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Aiken, our guest, and it's open forum. And I've got a pile of Necco wafers in front of me because Jimmy came in with gifts today. If you don't know what Necco wafers are, those of us who
What are Necco wafers?
They're little wafers made by the Necco Corporation,
Uh-huh.
Necco International.
Are they
Acme.
sweet or savory?
They
or what
are sweet as sweet. I think they're pretty much just sugar. They're just sugar wafers.
They're kind of chalky, too.
But among young Catholic children, they were often used when you were pretending to
playing
play
mass.
mass as a
Yeah.
child. Almost every Catholic kid in Massachusetts probably remembers at some point playing mass with Necco wafers. Never with the chocolate. I don't believe I've ever had chocolate Necco
Oh,
wafers. So
okay.
that would be like the whole
Yeah, the
wheat, I
others are
guess.
kind of fruit flavored, different kinds of fruit.
Right, and then there's white ones in there that look exactly like the host.
Oh,
So to a
okay.
child, that's an irresistible temptation to play mass. Again, 888-318-7884. Now we're going to Milwaukee, listening on Sirius XM Satellite Radio Channel 130, which is EWTN on Sirius Satellite Radio. James, we're very glad to have you. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yeah, I just wonder about if you get into a debate, let's say, about New Earth versus Old Earth. Can explain it more if you need to, otherwise.
No, I'm
Jimmy's
familiar with those
the
concepts.
term.
What's your question?
Well, okay. New Earth people say, because the genealogy only goes back 6,000 years, there can only be 6,000 years old. And then science, and of course a lot of it's based on carbon-14 dating and other things. Science said, well, the Earth is actually 3.3 million years. We have rocks here near Milwaukee, volcanic rock that goes back 3.3 billion years ago, I think it is.
Yeah, it's
have,
James. I'm
new
sorry that I'm
people
kind of interrupting you,
coming
but you're crackling. Your voice is crackling, so it's hard for some folks to hear you. So, all right. Given the volcanic activity in the Milwaukee area, which I believe is safe now, I don't believe there's been any recent volcanic activity in the Milwaukee area. Are you asking, Jimmy, which of these theories, old Earth or young Earth, is the one to go with, or that a Christian should go with, or what are you asking, Jimmy?
Well, I guess anybody, Christian, anybody. But the point is that there's so vastly the idea that supposedly New Earth people claim they have science that supports that it's only 6,000 years old, and it's that genealogy business in the Bible, and that in the old Earth, which goes back billions of years, and it's like science supposedly supports both of them.
All right. So which is it? We'll just.
Okay, so the young Earth and old Earth theories are ones that are both common these days. Historically, most Christians have been young Earth, believing that the Earth is only a few thousand years old. But beginning a couple of centuries ago, as modern science started to develop, and in particular as geology started to develop, evidence began to surface that led many scientists to conclude that the Earth is in fact a lot older. And current estimates are that the Earth is about 4.6 billion years old, billion with a B, and that the universe is about 13.8 billion years old, which is much older. Now, in terms of what does the evidence support, well, it's true that the genealogies in the Bible would indicate a date in the thousands of years. something like 6,000 years. But there are a couple of issues with that line of argument. The first one is genealogies in the ancient Near East often skipped generations, so they're not complete. And you can even see that in the genealogies of Jesus that are provided by Matthew and Luke. If you compare them with Old Testament genealogies, it's very clear that Matthew and Luke are skipping some generations. And in part, that's enabled by the fact that Hebrew didn't have a word for grandfather or great-grandfather. So any male you were descended from is your father, no matter how many generations back. And so it'd be easy to say things like, David is the father of Jesus. Even though you've just leaped over 1,000 years there between the time of David and the time of Jesus. And so we can't really look at these genealogies as a complete record. Also, particularly with the very earliest genealogies in Genesis, there's a question of how literal they're meant to be taken. And that's suggested, for example, by the enormously large ages that are attributed to various people, like Methuselah himself lives for almost 1,000 years. And there's been a question raised about, is that really meant to be taken literally, or is this fantastic age more like a symbol of how great the ancients like Methuselah were? So various people have pointed out, those factors. Then the church itself has looked at the account of Genesis 1 about the creation of the world, which presents the work of the Creator as if it took place in a period of just 6 days. And the church has concluded that essentially that's a symbolic sequence, that this is a symbolic sequence of 6 days so that the work of the Creator is fitted into the framework of a Hebrew week. And that's something that the Catechism of the Catholic Church says. It says that the Genesis 1 account presents the work of the Creator symbolically as a succession of 6 days. Now, that doesn't tell us how old the earth or the universe is. It could still be very young, or it could be much older. All that says is the Genesis account doesn't tell us one way or another the specific age. And so as a result, the church leaves it up to scientists to try to determine that issue. And most scientists across a variety of disciplines are convinced that the scientific evidence supports the earth being very old and the universe being even older. There is a pretty small minority of scientists that support the idea of a young Earth, and they think that the scientific evidence supports their viewpoint. So you do have a division among scientists. The great majority support an old Earth. A small minority supports a young Earth. I've done a personal review of both the biblical and the scientific data, and my personal view, although I defend the right of anybody to have a different opinion, my personal view is that I think the scientific evidence supports an old Earth. And if you'd like more information about that, I did a I did 3 episodes of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World as a sequence on that. I believe it's like episodes 119 to 121 or something like that, in which I lay out the biblical and the scientific evidence that I think supports this.
Thanks very, very much. Appreciate that call, James. And we head now to Braintree, Massachusetts, listening on the EWTN app. Paul in Braintree, thanks for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, good evening. Jimmy, my question actually comes from something I heard a few months ago on Father Robert Spitzer's Universe. I know you're very well familiar with Father Spitzer, of course. And he was talking about a question someone came, a phone in, regarding if when there's disaccord between a priest and his bishop, maybe the bishop takes exception to the fact that he takes exception he's preaching against maybe church doctrine, maybe he's preaching doctrine that's maybe not consistent with what they want to hear, and sometimes you can have an issue where there'd be a certain toxicity between the bishop and the priest. And he was saying that the one channel to go to is to what they call a metropolitan, who's basically like an ombudsman, an intermediary, and he tries to iron out any disaccord between the priest and the bishop. And what is basically a metropolitan? How long is that function in the church? What type of is he responsible for? Can you talk about that?
Metropolitan.
So a metropolitan is a title that's given to the archbishop of a metropolis. A metropolis is a diocese that is the head diocese of an ecclesiastical province. So, for example, you'll have a group of dioceses that are next to each other geographically. And here in the United States, we have several different ecclesiastical provinces. But basically, each province is a collection of dioceses that are near each other. And one of those dioceses is the head diocese. And that head diocese may be named a metropolis, and then the bishop, or typically archbishop, who leads it is referred to as the metropolitan archbishop, or just the metropolitan. So basically, he has a leadership function within the ecclesiastical province. He's not the boss of the other bishops. That would be the Pope. But he does have a leadership role with limited functions that he can perform to help out his brother bishops within the province. And I would guess that Father Spitzer was proposing that as a mechanism for handling problematic situations between bishops and their priests on some occasions.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate that call, Paul. We go now all the way down to Naples, Florida, listening on Ave Maria Radio. Jack in Naples, Florida, you are up next. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Well, my question has to do with
Jack,
what I heard,
can't hear you, Jack. You got to get closer to that. Go ahead, Jack.
what I heard Mass on EWTN about if you receive Holy Communion, that it takes away venial sin.
Mm-hmm.
That's my first question. The other question is, it's very difficult to discern the difference between a mortal sin and a venial sin sometimes.
Okay,
Not
so
all-
sorry about that. But Jimmy, does the Mass take away venial sin, and what's the difference between venial and mortal?
Does receiving communion.
Communion, I beg your
yeah,
pardon.
so communion is Jesus. Jesus is a source of grace, and therefore, unless you put a barrier in the way, you're going to receive grace when you receive Jesus in the Eucharist. And venial sin is one of the things that grace can deal with. Of course, you need to be repentant of the venial sin, but yes, it is the common understanding that the Eucharist will take away venial sin, and I'll leave that part there. Obviously, there's more that we could say, but the basic point is that yes, the Eucharist does remit venial sin. And in terms of discerning the difference between mortal and venial sin, it sometimes can be difficult to discern. And what I advise people in that situation is look in the Catechism, look up the requirements for mortal sin. There are 3 of them. You need to have grave matter. You need to have full knowledge of the moral character of the act you performed, and you need to give it deliberate consent. And so in trying to discern was a given sin venial or mortal, review those conditions and apply them as best you can. Did I commit something that had grave matter? Did I know that that's what I was doing at the time I was doing it? And did I say, yeah, I know what I'm doing and I just don't care? If those 3 conditions are met, then it's a mortal sin. Otherwise, it's a venial sin, if it's even a sin at all.
Jack, I will say thank you to you for that question. 888-31-TRUTH is our number. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest. And now we head over to Arkansas, listening on the new and improved Catholic Answers Live app is Osmar. Osmar, are you there with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Very impressed. Love your book. Jimmy, during the transfiguration of Jesus on the mountain, he spoke to Moses and Elijah. What do you think they were talking about?
Well, it's a matter of speculation because the Gospels don't give us a great deal of information here, but it seems pretty certain to me that they talked about Jesus and his ministry and what he was going to be doing in the future. You know, he was heading to Jerusalem. He was going to be sacrificed there on the cross. And so I think that that those kinds of themes and Jesus' role in God's plan in general were those that would have been under discussion.
Awesome. Thank you.
No
Thank
problem.
you very, very much. Man, we are moving today, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Do you realize that? We just move. Now, you think we got time to take another question, or should we just eat Necco wafers until? I'm willing
Up
to
to
just
you.
We'll go for a question. Luca, also in Massachusetts, listening on Catholic.com. Luca, we're glad to have you. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
I also have a question about one of the mysteries, of the luminous mysteries, which I was praying at the Rosary today. I had two questions. I'm going to limit myself to one of them. That's at the institution
What's
of the
your
Eucharist.
question?
My question, yeah. So my question is, so I know that Jesus instituted the Eucharist at the Last Supper, and that when we at Mass take the Eucharist, we are receiving the body of Christ. In the real present, the Christ that has been resurrected. Since the institution of the Eucharist happened before the resurrection, before the crucifixion, it is the exact same Eucharist.
Okay. Is that the same Eucharist? We'll have to take a quick break, and we'll come back and get an answer for you. Hang on. We're coming back with more Open Forum on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register.
This is Dr. David Anders. Are your friends or family discouraging you from becoming Catholic?
We can help on Call to Communion tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Live Open Forum. Jimmy Hicken, our guest. A little bit of groovy music there for Luca.
It's
on the
Thursday,
lines.
yeah.
It's Thursday, and Luca wanted to know. Okay, when we receive the Eucharist, receive the substance of the body and blood of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's one reception of the Eucharist that happens before the crucifixion and resurrection. So is it the same Eucharist?
Yes, because it's the same Jesus.
Okay.
And just as he offered himself once on the cross, but the sacrifice of the Mass is a representation of that one sacrifice, the sacrifice at the Last Supper would have been a pre-presentation of it. But it's the same Jesus. The priest is the same. The offering is the same. The purpose is the same. It's all the same.
And thank you very much for that question, Luca. We appreciate it. It's open forum. There are lots of folks on the line, so we just keep moving through. And now we have needed a call from Canada. Anonymous from Canada listening on EWTN is next. Thank you, Anonymous, for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Happy to.
My question is about the reading today in the daily mass in the Old Testament about Judges 11 from 29 to 39, which is about
Jephthah's daughter.
Jephthah, who is yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So
I was wondering, why, how could God give him I don't know, permission or to do such a thing as to sacrifice in a Holocaust his daughter if he won the war?
So one of the things you find when you read the book of Judges is, just like when you read other historical books in the Old Testament, is the biblical author frequently does not have that high an opinion of the person he's writing about. In the historical books, when David sins, the biblical writer, points it out. And Solomon sins even worse than David. And many of the Israelite kings after Solomon's time were just total sinners, and some of the kings of Judah as well. And the biblical authors are frank about that. And so just because you're reading about an individual in a historical book doesn't mean that either the biblical author or God approves of what that person is doing. And this is true also in the book of Judges. One of the things you find in Judges is that a lot of the judges are profoundly flawed individuals. Samson, for example, he is really, really flawed, but nevertheless, God uses this flawed individual as part of his plan, which is, something God does all the time because we're all flawed individuals, but God uses us as part of his plan despite our flaws. So when we look at Jephthah, one of the things, if you read the Jephthah story closely, and especially if you compare it with other things we know about this period from the Bible, Jephthah's an idiot. Jephthah is just incredibly stupid. There is a point that's made about him. He's the son of a prostitute, so he is not an educated man at all. But he's violent enough that when they need his help, the people come to get him to try to help get deliverance from the people that are oppressing them. And Jephthah is willing to do that in exchange for power. But when Jephthah then goes and talks to the enemies of Israel, he misrecounts things. He has an erroneous idea about the history of the region that he's talking to them about. He gets the name of their god wrong. And he's not presented as a reliable person at all. And that's part of the narrative when we then come to his rash vow that he would offer to the Lord the first thing that comes out of his house when he comes back in triumph as a thank offering, whether it's an animal or even a person. That's considered an incredibly foolish thing to do, and it so happens it's his own daughter that comes out. So the way the biblical narrator presents Jephthah, he is not a figure to be admired. God may have used him as part of his plan, but Jephthah's an idiot, and there's nothing that underscores that more than his rash vow that leads to the apparent death of his daughter off camera.
Does that make sense to you, Anonymous?
Jimmy, thanks, Cy.
All right.
Okay.
All right. You're very, very welcome. Thank you. Again, the lines keep filling right back up again as we take calls, so we will keep moving here. Let's see. Next, we go to Omaha, Nebraska. Debbie, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Glad to have you, Debbie. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Thank you for having me. Okay, earlier in the show, you had a caller who asked about how do we know that the people are in hell? Mm-hmm. And part of your answer had to do with, and I don't remember what you said before this, but the part that caught my interest was that the damned manifesting themselves to the living.
Mm-hmm.
Is that? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
something
so
St.
that-
Thomas Aquinas thought was possible, if God allows it.
Okay. Okay, so then here's my question. I know there are psychics out there. They're all over the place, and I've never put any stock in them because, that's what our faith teaches us. And
Well,
but I do-
our faith teaches us not to patronize mediums. That's not the same thing as all psychics.
Oh, I see.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, my question is I personally know of a young woman who grew up in our community, and she started receiving messages from people who had died when she
Mhm.
was very young. And her father told her not to tell very many people, of course, because they wouldn't understand. But she received messages from people who have passed on, messages for their loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
So can the spirits of those who have died manifest themselves to people who are living like her?
Well, they can and they do. When this happens, it's something that is the church refers to as private revelation, and God can allow the saints in heaven to manifest to people on earth. He can, according to St. Thomas Aquinas' opinion, he can also allow the souls in purgatory to manifest, or even the souls of the damned to manifest if it will accomplish one of God's purposes. So God can allow this to happen. Sometimes it happens entirely legitimately. God may just pick someone and choose to allow them to have private revelations. That was the case, for example, with the 3 shepherd children at Fatima. God allowed the Virgin Mary to appear to them and give them various messages, including messages about people who were in the afterlife. There are also situations where, even though it's breaking the rules and you're not supposed to do it this way, God can allow them to manifest in other circumstances, including through mediums. We see that in the historical books of the Old Testament, where at one point King Saul is desperate to have some information from God about an upcoming military campaign, and God is not picking up the phone. God is not answering him by dreams or by prophets or by the Urim and Thummim that the high priest had in Jerusalem. And so Saul is so desperate that he goes to a medium, exactly the kind of person that we're forbidden to use, and says, I want you to call up the prophet Samuel for me so that I can get information about this upcoming military campaign from Samuel, since God is not answering me. And so the woman calls up Samuel, and the biblical text presents it as Samuel. Some people have said, well, maybe that's a demon because it's always demons. But no, the text presents it as Samuel. And in fact, that's confirmed in the book of Sirach, where the inspired author of Sirach confirms that, yeah, that was Samuel. He was such a great prophet. He even spoke to the king from beyond the grave. And when Samuel gets there, he says, well, number one, why are you bugging me? Why have you disturbed me? And Saul explains he wants this information, and Samuel says, well, I'm afraid to tell you, you're going to lose, which he then does. But this is, even though it was forbidden by God to consult the dead through a medium, nevertheless, God allowed this to happen, even though Saul was breaking the rules. So we shouldn't be quick to say what can or what cannot happen in these circumstances. We know that God can allow saints and suffering souls and perhaps even the damned to manifest on some occasions, and he can allow that to happen to individual people, whether God takes the initiative to start giving the person private revelations, or even if someone's breaking the rules and is calling up the dead like a medium does, God can still allow it to happen in some situations, although the message you hear may not be the one you want.
What do you think, Debbie?
Right. Well, that sounds good. Now, that leads to my other question. So is going to a medium to possibly receive messages or communicate with your loved ones, is that wrong?
Yes, it's forbidden in the Bible, and Christian tradition it's forbidden in Deuteronomy in particular, and Christian tradition has always considered itself bound to that, and the Catechism of the Catholic Church reiterates that.
Okay. All right. That answers my question. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Debbie. Thanks very, very much. Hey, we've got a free ebook right now for you. You can get it over at shop.catholic.com. Just click the ebook banner, and you can get Answering Protestant Objections to Catholic Teachings. Get your free download today at shop.catholic.com.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
He was a doctor of the Church and one of the greatest defenders of Christ's divinity.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Athanasius of Alexandria fought against the Arian heresy that questioned the divinity of Christ. He once condemned the Arians as opposers of Christ who had dug a pit of ungodliness. It was said of him, Athanasius contra mundum, Athanasius against the world, but for Christ. He died in 373.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's open forum today. Next hour, our friend Tom Nash will be here. This hour, Jimmy Aiken, and your calls are welcome. 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Up next, right here in San Diego with us, watching on YouTube, Ryan in San Diego. You there with us, Ryan?
I'm right here. Can you guys hear me okay?
It sound good, Ryan. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
All right. Hey, Jimmy. I love your stuff. I've listened to a couple of your debates. I really appreciate it. And I am a Protestant at this time, but I'm strongly considering Catholicism. But I have like three questions that I'm just having a hard time getting over. And I think that, and I can't find any YouTube videos on them, so I just wasn't sure. So I thought I'd give you guys a call and see what you guys have to say about these, because this one might be misunderstanding on my part. Maybe I've been fed misinformation. That's definitely happened before. But my first question is, so I'm a Protestant, and I know that the Catholic Church, from what I've heard, has translated the Bible into multiple different languages, Greek, so on and so forth, for the first 2 or 3 centuries.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the beginning of the 4th century, they did the Mass only in Latin. So, which was I think the language of the people at that time. But then the Latin language died later, right? As far as people speaking it, just the average person who goes to church. So they were hearing it in Latin until 1960, right?
Well, even a little later than that, but yes.
Yeah, and so basically, my understanding is they went to church. People went to church. They were read the scriptures, from the Latin Vulgate, which is Latin. They were being preached to in Latin. The Mass was done in Latin. And these people are just sitting, and they're not understanding what's being said. So how did that benefit them? I mean,
okay. So the situation has some additional texture to it than what you described. The Church has never had a single language. There's always been a mix of languages. Now, in the West, where Latin was common, and was the standard language in the empire, it did become normal to celebrate the liturgy in Latin for quite a number of centuries. But there were always other parts of the Christian world where Mass was being celebrated in Greek and in Aramaic and in other languages that were the local languages of the people. So it was really in the West that Latin became dominant. When it did become dominant, as you say, most people could understand it. It was the common international language, and so it was widely understood. And eventually Latin developed, as languages do, into other languages like Spanish and Italian and French and Romanian, which are all called Romance languages because they come from Latin, the language that came from Rome. So they're known as Romance languages. And in those areas, people would still retain a significant ability to understand Latin just because it was related to the language they ordinarily spoke. And this was a slow transition, so there wasn't a sharp dividing line. Now, one of the things about religion is it tends to be, it can be both revolutionary in some circumstances, but more frequently it tends to be quite conservative. It preserves things from the past. And that's not just Christianity, that's religions in general. So, for example, Hebrew is used to this day in Jewish synagogues, and that's comparable to the way Latin was used in Christian churches, because Hebrew was the language that was spoken by the people of Israel during the time of the Hebrew Scriptures writing, and so it was normal to celebrate the Jewish liturgy in Hebrew and to read the Jewish Scriptures in Hebrew. They might also read them in a modern language, but you see a kind of parallel between what the use of Hebrew in synagogues and the use of Latin in churches, because this is just part of what religion does. It tends to conserve things from the past that are considered sacred, and it doesn't change them easily. That's why in the Lord's Prayer, lots of people will still say, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." You know, nobody talks like that today. In fact, a lot of people today don't even know what hallowed means. And spoilers, it means sacred or considered sacred in this context. But because we're used to saying it that way, even though that form of English is about 400 years old, we continue to say it that way because people perceive the Lord's Prayer as sacred, and they frequently don't want to change it. Certainly many people don't. And that's basically the case with Latin as well. In the liturgy, people would regard the liturgy because it's divine worship as sacred, and they wouldn't want it to change unexpectedly or suddenly, or it was kind of amazing. We had actually the shift from Latin to English virtually overnight. I mean, that was a huge change, and it didn't please everybody because a lot of people liked Latin. They thought this gives it a sacred ring, and it seemed more pious to them, and a lot of people still feel that way. Having said that, it's not the case that people were just sitting at Mass not knowing what was going on. Because some people may have, but that's not the norm. Because what people would do is they had what are known as missals. A missal is a book that contains the prayers and or readings of the Mass, and there were bilingual missals that people would have, and they would bring them with them to Mass. And they would have both the Latin prayers of the Mass and an English translation on the facing page. So they could follow, if they didn't know Latin, and many of them did know at least some Latin because they were taught it in school. You know, if they were going to Catholic school, or even back in the day, many public schools would teach Latin. And so people would have a basic knowledge of Latin, but they'd also have the English on the facing page so they could follow along if their Latin was rusty or things like that. So they actually were more involved than you might suspect.
Yeah, you kind of develop the habit. I mean, even now we say the Agnus Dei in Latin, and but there's some Greek.
We say, the Greek is the Kyrie eleison.
And there's just more of it. There's more of that. Ryan, I wish we could have a little bit of a conversation about this because you're here in San Diego, and you're feeling so close to coming to the church. But unfortunately, I'm not happy with the quality of our phones today. Something's up, and I don't think it will allow for conversation. But if you want to hang on the line, we'd love to send you a copy of Why We're Catholic by our colleague Trent Horn.
Also, the Bible is a Catholic book, which deals with the translation of the Bible into Latin and other languages.
Great. Can we send them both, Thomas? But just hang on, Ryan. If you'd like to get those books, we'll send them over to you. And if you're ever in the neighborhood, happy to give you a tour of the place, and you can come visit that way, because phones are just tough today. All right, I'm going to go to Liz in Georgia, listening on FM 91.1. Liz, as you can hear, we're having a little bit of phone trouble, so if you could just go right to your question, that would be really helpful.
Okay. My question is, you were talking about going to mediums with another caller.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would you do if you did go to a medium and followed instructions and actually used a part of the Bible in order to follow those instructions. And it was about your family, and it was for your family. What would you need to do to, I guess, cleanse and not do harm to your family any further, or if possibility that there was any demonic attention to that, how would you draw?
So what I would do is I would pray to God and say, I'm sorry I did that. I didn't realize I shouldn't have done that. I know better now, and I won't do it again. And please, don't let anything bad happen as a result. And I'd leave it there unless there is some additional factor. Now, sometimes people think, I've exposed myself to demons, because it's always demons. People always leap to that conclusion. But the good news is the devil doesn't have unlimited power. And so a lot of times, even though people may suspect a demon is involved, there's really no evidence that a demon is involved. So unless something weird is happening, like, I don't know, objects floating around the room or people's heads turning around, I would assume that there is no demonic involvement, and that this is just, the medium that the person went to may have, been innocently misled or whatever, or even a con artist or someone who is sincerely doing something they thought was good. But unless there's evidence of actual demonic activity, we should not be paranoid about demons. We just shouldn't think there's a demon under every rock, because there's not. So unless there's something more, I wouldn't worry about it. Now, if there is something weird going on, well, I would start with some prayers for deliverance. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops even has a book that you can order of prayers that can be said by lay people for deliverance from oppression by evil spirits, from demons. Worse comes to worse, you could call in a priest, and, or not worse comes to worse, but you could also call in a priest, talk to him, maybe get a blessing from him. If someone showed evidence of possession, or if a house showed evidence of possession, or technically infestation, you could call in an exorcist to evaluate the situation. But I'm suspecting those measures aren't necessary, because if something like that were happening, you would have mentioned it by now, and you didn't mention anything like that. Finally, if you knew at the time that it was forbidden to go to mediums, and you say, I don't care, and God may not want me to go to a medium, but I don't care what God wants, I'm going to go anyway, well, then that could be a mortal sin, and you would need to go to confession about it. But unless you had that kind of knowing defiance of God's will, it would only be a venial sin at most, and you wouldn't need to go to confession about it.
Does that give you some comfort, Liz?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I think I started to say something. Okay. The thing is, I thought that there might have been some type of the possession because of the dementia that my mother suffered, and when she passed away, before she passed away, she saw shadow people, and the dog was at the back door barking all night when all of this came about. And
okay, so I want to give you the best answer I can, because we're about to hit our hard break for the end of the show. Is that those situations are unfortunate and would at the time have been worthy of investigation, but it could have just been the dog was hearing something outside, and it could have been just the ordinary effects of dementia. So none of that's proof that it was demons, but it would at the time have been worth investigating. In terms of what to do now, well, if you haven't had a mass said for your mom, go ahead and have a mass said for her. Unless there's some kind of activity that's currently going on, though, I don't think you need to do anything in particular other than repent.
And I have many times.
Well, praise God.
Then praise God, and don't beat yourself up for that.
Well,
accept the forgiveness that God wants you to have.
I was just worried because of a dream I'd had about my mother.
But yeah, you don't have to worry.
By a spirit.
Oh, Liz, that's an awful worry. But I think you, as Jimmy said, accept the forgiveness of God. God's not. He's not a trickster. He's not trying to harm you.
No, and God loves both you and your mother more than you love yourselves.
Oh, Jimmy Aiken, 3 times in one show you said it's always
Well, you see what I mean. People tend to go to that conclusion very easily.
Yeah, right. Well, I want to thank you for the Necco wafers.
My pleasure. I hope you enjoy them.
I will enjoy them. Tom Nash is coming up next, so if you're on the line, hang on the line. If you haven't called yet, you're welcome to call. We're going to continue with Open Forum with Tom, 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Don't forget, it's Triple Threat Thursday. You get, as long as if you spend $33 over at shop.catholic.com and you put in the promo code TRIPLE, you get a third off everything until midnight tonight, Hawaii time. All right, we'll take a quick break, and it'll be quick. We'll be right back.
So can I be heard in there?
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. He's here. Tom Nash is here, our good friend Tom Nash, for Open Forum. You can ask him anything you want, whether you're Catholic or not. You got a question about the Catholic faith. You got a question about the Bible, the Pope, the sacraments, the moral life. Tom's willing and happy to take your calls, 888-318-7884. And as always, I really do want to encourage those who are not Christian people, if you have got any questions or even objections, you say, I don't understand why you Christians do this or that, all very welcome. We love to have those conversations. Tom is long associated with all kinds of Catholic media, including EWTN and us here at Catholic Answers, where we're still colleagues here at Catholic Answers. The author of some...
Yay.
Yeah, that's right. Yay, Tom. Welcome, Tom. I'll just now that you chirped in, welcome, Tom.
Good morning and good afternoon.
All right, let's do the titles.
Good evening.
I don't know where you are. If you say good morning, I'm okay. He's probably in Malaysia.
Evening where I'm at. Yeah.
Sorry. Let's work through your books. So you wrote. You did not write the Bible.
No, I did not.
You did not write The City of God or the Summa. But now, so help me with the names of the books you did write.
The Biblical Roots of the Mass, which was originally called Worthy is the Lamb. Also, What Did Jesus Do? The Biblical Roots of the Catholic Church. Also, 20 Answers, the Rosary. And I would just like to encourage all of our listeners, viewers, to take advantage of our 20 Answers series. It's you want a good apologetics library. That is a great discounted price for those. It's well worthwhile. Very distilled, dense, well written.
I was told that your Rosary book did really well. A lot of people wanted 20 Answers to the Rosary.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, but I have to say Todd Aguilera, our director of publishing, does a great job with overseeing that process. And I just love the whole 20 Answers. Plus, it's not just apologetics and a variety of questions on each different topic, but also there's some practical things to apply in terms of the faith, in terms of living it and sharing it, and things like that. So I think they're a wonderful tool that should be used in parishes around the country, around the world.
Tom Nash is our guest. It's Open Forum, 888-318-7884. Lines have been getting full and staying full all day, but I have to ask you something before I go, because I heard you did something, and I believe it was today, that no American has been allowed to do for a long time.
Yes, I got to go over to Canada. I go to Bioped. They do great work with orthotics. I've been going there almost 30 years, and it was nice to be able to go across. I had to get my COVID tests and all this.
Oh, you got to get a COVID test?
Ago.
Oh,
yeah. Even though I got vaccinated, I had to have a COVID test just as like the double check, and thankfully it came in just in time for me to get over the border and all that. So it all worked out. I love Canada. I love their national anthem. I love how they affirm God
in the national anthem. They tried to get rid of it, but they didn't get rid of it. They still affirm God.
And I always like to say, make the sign of the cross by saying, God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on God for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on God for thee. That's it.
Thank you for singing the Canadian national, at least part of the Canadian national anthem. I feel like a baseball game should start now, but
you're right.
Okay, so you get to go across to Canada. Canada's been closed for like a year and a half or something. I don't know how long it's been since an American. Did you get the sense that they missed us at all, or I hate to say this, but I get the feeling that they're kind of enjoying not having us cross their border. I
guess it depends. It depends on the Canadians and how the Americans act, etc. But I was welcome. The great Catholic guy who runs Bioped, so I was welcome. But you funny mentioned that about a baseball game or a sports game starting. My nephew graduated from high school several years back, and they sang the national anthem. And in Michigan, you often have, and with Canadian games, that you'd hear the national anthem first, and if it's in Canada, you hear "O Canada." So I started singing "O Canada," and my sister, whose son was graduating, turned back, she smacked me, "Knock it off!" But and some people were laughing because exactly you have that.
You just do it. You just get in the habit. You sing the American national anthem, and then you sing the Canadian. Unless you're in Canada, in which case you sing the Canadian national anthem first, and then the American national anthem.
There you go.
You ready to take some questions? Oh,
ready to go.
Oh, by the way, congratulations on going to Canada. Thank you, Canada, for letting Americans back in. I'm not hurt. I don't want you to feel like I'm hurt or anything. I don't even live near Canada. Jason in Vancouver, Washington. Oh, he could go over to Canada. Listening on.
He's in Canada.
Listening on Modern Day Radio. Hi, Jason. You there with us?
Yeah, I waited long enough. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I'm so sorry you waited long enough. I apologize.
Take off, hey.
Go ahead. What's your question?
My question is, there's got to be some reference, 40 days, 40 nights, and they always say, here I am, whenever God calls somebody.
Right.
Yeah, they always answer, here I am. Why do they say
Yeah, like Moses on the mountain. When God says Moses and he says, here I am. Why do these biblical people always say, here I am?
Well, I would say if God's calling you, it's a good response to give. But, there are other cases like with Job, you see him arguing with God. It's not always here I am. But I would think if one hears from God and knows that it's God, here I am is a good response because it recognizes the gravity of who it is speaking to you, and you're ready to serve. Or hopefully, you're ready to serve and ready to be on mission. But I don't think it's not a universal, but I think it's an appropriate response that recognizing the Creator and the Creator's addressing you, that you want to be available and to serve however He wants, because He's got our best good in mind, of course.
What do you think, Jason?
Well, I just was hoping there was something deeper. I know he goes, like God says, I am. Moses, who want to tell him, who might say your name is? He says, I am, right?
Yeah.
You're right.
That means I am. I didn't know why did, out of all of the, from Samuel, right, she gives him, and then he's waking up and going to the priest.
Here I am, Lord.
He calls for me, he goes, no, that's God. And then it goes all the way down to Elijah. So, all these years, they all say the same answer. So I didn't know what the significance was in that answer.
I don't think I could say to you, as you note, I am who am. That means God's name, that His essence is existence. That is His nature for God to exist. That's why He says I am. But I think that is just an appropriate response. I don't think there's necessarily anything deeper, as opposed to the fact that when God calls, and that became the tradition, and when God calls and it's God, that you're here and you're ready to serve, as opposed to doing a lot of questioning. So I don't think it has to, you mentioned His name, God's name, and as I say, that means I am who am is His nature, His essence is existence. It's His nature to exist. But I think it just means that someone is realizing it's God calling and ready to serve. And that became a great tradition among the Israelite people, that when God calls, this is the appropriate response.
Jason, I appreciate the call and the question, and you have that. It's an interesting, you pick that out, and it's a fascinating question. And if you're interested in a whole variety of those kinds of questions, especially because you waited so long and patiently waited, I'd like to send you Jimmy Akin's book, A Daily Defense, 365 Days Plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist, because there's 366 questions that are faith questions, and then a full-page answer to each question. I think you'll enjoy it. If you'd like it, hang on the line, and Thomas will get your information, and we'll send you a copy of that book. Our number here is 888-318-7884, but I got to say good luck because the phones have stayed busy for the entire afternoon. So we'd like to get to you, but I just I can't guarantee anything because the phones are very, very full. Tom was mentioning the 20 Answers deal before. Let me tell you what that is. There's 47 titles in our 20 Answers series. Tom wrote the one on the rosary, but there's ones on sacraments, on the Bible, on various other religions like Mormonism or Jehovah's Witnesses. There's some on Mary and Jesus. And so, there's a whole bunch of them, and on all different topics, and you'll get a real apologetics education if you've read all 44 or 47 of them. And right now, you can get them individually for 65% off. That's a 65% savings on each and every one of those books. Just go check out the selection today at shop.catholic.com.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connection's set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Okay, I've been a Catholic for 5 years, but I suffered under a lot of things due to my Protestantism as a Pentecostal, and I just want to personally ask God to bless you for your ministry, for everything you do, and the help that you give people.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kelly, your host. Tom Nash is our guest this hour. And you are welcome to ask whatever you like, 888-318-7884. Up next is Ken in Altoona, Pennsylvania, listening to EWTN Channel 130 on Sirius XM Satellite Radio. We're very glad to have you, Ken. Go ahead with your question for Tom.
Yes, my question is, what is the soul, and do animals have it?
Yes, the soul is the life principle of a living being, and animals do have souls. We have immortal souls, that is, we have spiritual souls that live on even when we die, whereas animals do not. People will talk about, will animals be in heaven, and that's a matter of theological speculation. It was asked to St. Thomas Aquinas one time, will I have my dog or will I have my pet in paradise? And he says, his response was, if you need him. And of course, if you're with God, he wouldn't necessarily need an animal, but that's not the last word on that matter. But yes, a soul is a life principle, and we are distinctive in that we are, we have spiritual souls. We are a body-soul composite. And when we speak about the spirit of a pure spirit would be an angel, and one who after birth, you talk about ghosts, that would be the soul of a person who has died, a human person. So we are body soul composites.
So Ken, what do you think?
Yes, well, it says in the Bible that the soul of all flesh is in the blood, and all animals have blood. So
yes. Well, life is in the blood. It says life is in the blood. Animals. You're talking about animals. All a soul means is to have a life principle. That is what causes it to exist, and it's a material soul, whereas we have an immaterial soul. Our soul, as a spiritual soul, is in our body in a whole and undivided way. Similar to how Jesus Christ in the Eucharist is present in the Eucharist in a whole and undivided way, such that if you break the Eucharist, you still have Christ whole and undivided in that piece that was broken. Does that help out?
Yes, thank you very much.
Well, hang on, Ken, because I got more help for you, because you're not going to believe this, but this is really quite a coincidence, I think. But I said, I don't know what a soul is. And so I thought, who can I ask? And we'll make a focus episode of it for our podcast. And so just last week it went up. And it's called What is a Soul? And it's with Carlo Broussard, because Carlo is a philosopher, and that's who you ask. If you want to know what a soul is, you ask a philosopher. So if you go to CatholicAnswersFocus.com right now, there's an entire 25-minute conversation where I just started by asking Carlo, what is a soul? And then he gave me the full Thomistic answer. Will you check it out, Ken?
Yes, I'm going to read that, definitely, because...
No, you don't have to read it. It's a show. It's a podcast. So you just watch it.
Okay.
Yeah. So just go to CatholicAnswersFocus.com or go to YouTube and put in Catholic Answers Focus, and you'll come to it. Tom, you know a lot about the soul, so I will ask you this. Who, Tom, is the Queen of Soul?
That would be Aretha Franklin.
All right.
By the way, speaking of, we go from Motown back to Canada, and there's a tie-in here, really, that the people at Bioped, you take in your used shoes, and they will help with the souls and they give them away to poor people. So it's called Souls, S-O-L-E-S, for souls.
Do you own a part of this business, Tom?
I do not own. I have
literally
no
done an
stock.
advertisement for them 3 times now.
I have no stock, but I
think
just
you're-
thought it was a nice tie-in with the Souls for Souls.
It is a very good one. And
that's nonprofit. That's not making any money.
all right, one more question about souls, and then I'll stop.
All right.
Who's the soul man?
You would probably have to say James Brown.
No, Sam and Dave. Well, James Brown is a soul man.
Oh,
yeah,
you mean the guy that I'm a soul man?
I'm a soul man. Yeah, the Sam and Dave.
Then I'm thinking. But wait a minute.
You
What's
think
his
John
name,
Belushi?
though? Well, that Belushi and Aykroyd did Blues Brothers, but the the hardest working man in business, James Brown.
That's James Brown, the hardest working man in show business.
James Brown. But he.
I'm going to do
also-
another call.
yeah.
We're going to let you think about this while you're answering a theological
right.
question. Susanna in Miami, watching on YouTube. You are next. Susanna, don't quiz him on pop music, but anything else you can ask Tom.
Thank you.
Oh, shoot. I wanted to ask a pop song, so, well, I guess I'll have to.
Talk to you later, Susanna.
I like Susanna. All right. Sorry we let you down.
Hi. Don't worry. Yeah, my question, I have a really good friend. He's sort of in like a process returning to the faith, but he's also been going to like the Freemasons and like going to their meetings. Obviously, he's not speaking a lot about it, but I do not know what to do. First of all, I really don't know much about the Freemasons, so if you could tell me here, it would be great. And afterwards, I would like to know, like, what could I do to help him come back from that to the Catholic faith? Like, to show him that that's not the way.
Okay.
Quick question, Susanna. Is he formerly a Mason, or is he just attending some meetings and thinking about becoming a Mason? Do you know what the exact status is at this point?
No, he's saying like he's curious, you know.
Okay.
He always said that he wouldn't do anything that would go against like Christ, but he's still going. So yeah.
Yeah. In a nutshell, a Catholic cannot be a Mason. We have materials for more detail at Catholic Answers, Catholic.com. If you look up in Freemasons, you can find more information. But in a nutshell, it's an organization that has been hostile to the church. People will say, well, wait a second, what about all the great work they do with regard to kids with handicaps? No doubt about that they do some good work in that regard, but that does not negate the fact that they have long been opposed to the Catholic Church, and a Catholic is not free to do so, free to join them. Matter of fact, that's why the Knights of Columbus came into being, because of the fraternal organization of the Freemasons, that a lot of people were joining the Freemasons who were Catholic because it gave fraternal benefits, life insurance or death benefits for widows, things like that. And so that's part of the reason why Father Michael McGivney started the Knights of Columbus. And a lot of people, too, for networking, will join the Masons. And I remember living in Steubenville, Ohio. They had a Masonic temple. They had a hall where people would gather. I remember they had a Christmas play there. I say, I will not go there. I don't care whether it's a good thing going on there. I'm not going into the Masonic temple just out of principle. And there was a person who served on council, or one of the people in government, and he was Catholic, and I said, you're not supposed to. I gave him information that from the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith that said you're not supposed to do this, and he still did it, unfortunately. And I think a lot of people, because of the networking that allows that people can, with jobs and things like that it can be of service in that regard. And I think you just got to take a principled stand and say, no, I'm not going to, because this is an organization that has long been hostile to the church. It is not a strictly Christian. They'll say, anyone, kind of a higher power you believe, they will accommodate, but it is not strictly a Christian organization. And you'll see Protestants that will be critical of it. And there's, it is long plotted against the church in various ways. For example, Maximilian Kolbe talks about this, and seeing what he saw at Rome back in the day, and how they would speak about wanting to topple the Pope or the Church and things like that. But I would suggest going on our website, Catholic.com, and look for more information on the Masons, and then share that with your friend and encourage him. Say, hey, whatever fellowship that they have there, you can still have friends with people who are Masons, but not to fellowship with them in terms of their strictly Masonic activity. And to trust in God and the fellowship of the Church and the sacraments to give him the grace and the blessings that he needs.
Susanna, what do you think?
Well, yeah, it's just that he understands that, and he's always saying, like, no, I'm not going to do anything that goes against my, like, Christ and everything, but he's still curious, so he's still going. And he says that that's okay. Is that true?
Well, no, I would not say. But if he's going to the meetings and he's fraternizing them in distinctive Masonic activities, people, curiosity, there's that old saying, curiosity killed the cat. But there's curiosity can be problematic, including with, some of these activities that they can engage in, and the upper levels could be more spiritually problematic, satanic-oriented, potentially. And I would just say it's kind of like people playing with a Ouija board too. You don't want to be, gee, let's try this out and let's see, it's okay. No, curiosity. When the Church has directed you not to do something, then you do not want to engage in activities that the Church has expressly forbidden, and therefore fellowship again with whoever. Just like Catholics can fellowship with whoever as friends, but you don't want to engage in distinctively Masonic activities. And I remember somebody was a funeral, and so the sister's husband was a Mason, and I said, he's going there, that you can pray, but just don't participate in any, because it was going to be a Masonic ceremony at the funeral home, and she wanted to be there to be supportive of her sister. I said, well, just pray as a Catholic, and anything that's distinctively Masonic, refrain from doing, and pray silently against it. So I would just encourage you to talk to your friend in that regard. Show them our website, and also have them talk to local priests, because that's a great local reaffirmation of what I'm saying.
And Susanna, if you'd like, I will send you a book, Why We're Catholic by Trent Horn. Maybe you just want to have it around while you are having these discussions about faith. You might find it helpful. Thank you very, very much for the call. I'm going to keep moving because I got to get another call in before we go to the break. But if you would like to call back and if further things come up, we do this open forum Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we'd love it if you'd call again. Again, hang on the line if you'd like to get the book Why We're Catholic. Let's go to, I do not know. I'm having trouble reading the name here. Is this just East? The name is East? Maybe I'm not having trouble reading it. Is your name East in Mount Shasta, California?
It's Heath.
Heath. Oh, okay. So there was just a little spelling problem there. I thought it was me for a second, Heath. I apologize
It was hard to hear a minute ago. I didn't have good service.
Oh, well, you're very kind to say that, because I don't want to say. I never like to say who's taking the calls, when we have a mistake like that, and because it embarrasses Thomas if I say anything. So, Heath, go ahead with your question for Tom.
So, I work in a mill up here, and it's I like to keep my rosary on me. I have been trying to get to where I pray it on my second lunch.
Yep.
New to the Catholic Church. I'm going through RCIA class with my wife.
Oh, beautiful.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
I've looked everywhere. Thank you. I've looked everywhere and read things and can't find anything about it. In my pocket, I'm worried about breaking it. I'm always against things in the mill and stuff. I'm just wondering about wearing it under my shirt.
Sure. That'd be fine. Kind of like a scapular. Sometimes people wear it outside, and people say, is that appropriate? Well, I mean, it could be a means of evangelization these days, and I've seen some people in giving out rosaries, they might sometimes wear them. It's like, well, okay, maybe as a means of evangelization, that they might themselves think about God and Christ and what he did for them. But for you to wear it around your neck and under your shirt would be fine. And I suppose if someone ever saw it, if it were outside your shirt, and it might be a great way to talk. I imagine if you're working at the mill, then you might not be able to, if you lean over, and there could be problems depending on the type of work you do, that you don't want to get caught in machinery or something like that. But nothing wrong with wearing it around your neck in that regard, similar to like a scapular, for example, or some other religious medal.
What do you think, Heath?
Okay. That sounds good. I was just, everything I've read, it's yes and no, and there's never really been a exact answer I could find.
Well, I had the Irish relatives who said never wear a rosary because that's the tradition among the Irish. But there's many cultures where people have always worn the rosary as jewelry and then used it for prayer. So it is a yes and no, actually, because it's very different.
And if you wear it reverently, and you see religious, and they usually have it on the side, by their what would be attached to their version of a religious garb of the belt, and so it's hanging down, so it's a visible witness in that regard. So I think the bottom line is to wear it reverently and be ready to talk about it if necessary. A metal chain might be better in terms of not irritation or.
Hey, Heath, hang on the line. I'd like to send you a copy of my book, A Teacher of Strange Things, Who Jesus Was, What He Taught, and Why People Still Follow Him. As you go through the RCIA process, you might find it helpful. We'll be right back.
Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
This is Dr. David Anders. Are your friends or family discouraging you from becoming Catholic?
We can help on Call to Communion tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. A little bit of groovy music, a little bit of open forum. Tom Nash is our guest. The consensus in the studio here among the entire staff is that I'm not a very nice person for calling Thomas out and for putting Tom Nash on the spot about Sam and Dave. I think I'm the least popular person here. Some days you're just a rotten person, Tom, I found. I don't know. Maybe you don't. It seems to me that there's probably not a day where Tom Nash was a rotten person, but I can tell you, I got my rotten person.
I have my
day.
moments, and I think you're a fine person.
Oh, well,
I've spent time with you, and you've been gracious to let me stay at your house and the Tom Nash room and all the rest of that stuff. So I affirm you and your wife and your family.
Yeah, the Tom Nash room. We named the room the Tom Nash room. And well, I wouldn't have named it the Tom Nash room though if I didn't if I knew you were from Detroit and didn't know Sam and Dave. Had I known that, no way the room would have been named after.
Maybe I get a make-up Motown question later on. Redemption.
Okay. All right.
I'm 1-1.
You are 1-1. Well, you better not get Aretha Franklin wrong. I mean, I have to hang up on you if you can't.
That would be problematic.
You need to give. You know what you need to give Aretha Franklin? One thing.
Respect.
Thank you. Jason in Pittsburgh, listening to
Redemption.
Redemption, EWTN, channel 130 on Sirius XM satellite radio. You are up next, Jason. Go ahead with your question for Tom.
Yes, good evening, Tom. I'm an Episcopalian, and I was just curious, how do Catholics justify the Virgin Mary being sinless in regards to Romans 3:23?
Yes. Well, we would recognize, I mean, that's oftentimes the passage that would say, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and yet we know that there are children, right, who are affected by original sin but have themselves not sinned, and so that in that sense the word all was understood to be the great many, but not each and every. And this, in fact, was not an issue for Catholics and Orthodox, and even Luther. At the time, Luther had a very high view of the Blessed Mother, as did Calvin. So in that sense, we see what she is. We see that as Carl Keating says in his book, Catholicism and Fundamentalism, that it's understood to be the great many, because if you want to say each and every one, then you'd have to say every child who's below the age of reason, who cannot personally sin, would have sinned, and that would necessarily be not the case. So that it's understood to be the great many, but it doesn't preclude an exception. And of course, the exception is not because of the Blessed Mother per se, but rather because of God's blessing on her, of giving her this singular grace, and then also her cooperating with it. And so that would be the basic response to that all does not mean absolutely each and every one, because we can see that there are exceptions with regard to human beings who have never sinned, that is, those who are below the age of reason, and those who have died before reaching the age of reason. So they would be among the all, and yet they would not have sinned.
Okay, that was helpful. It wasn't a gotcha question. I'm just curious of.
No, I understand. And you're Episcopalian yourself? Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, because
we have a rough history.
No, but still, there's a lot in common between, when I've gone to England, and although there is the division between Catholics and Anglicans, especially when you speak of Henry VIII before Thomas Cranmer gets in there, that there is more of a connection and a closer union. And of course, even though we would disagree in part on the validity of the sacraments, there are high church Anglicans who believe in the real presence and would believe that they receive it. We would charitably dispute the orders, but there's even on the Eucharist, there is similar convictions, and you also see other sacraments more so than you would say with the Lutherans and some other Christians. So, I believe in affirming the good and charitably discussing what we disagree on.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
God bless you in Pittsburgh.
You're both in what was sometimes referred to as the Rust Belt, Tom, right?
The Rust Belt, yes. And
it's looking good, though. Like Detroit's looking better. Pittsburgh's looking better. Yeah. Don't you think?
And the Steelers are looking for a hopeful season. Big, serious football country there. And we can have a show could we have a podcast one day on talking about the theology of football?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't know what it is. You're going to have to... you're going to have to tell me what the theology of football is. Don't do it now, Tom. I know how you are. Right. I know I wasn't saying now. But at some point, if we can discuss what it is.
It's a very Catholic game.
Football is a Catholic game, really.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You look at... Yes. I mean, it's not for naught that Notre Dame is... That it's a Catholic game. You look that it's great game at Notre Dame is football, and then you look around the NFL, Vince Lombardi, George Hallis, Catholicism,
Newt Rockne
all go together. Redemptive suffering.
Is that real? All right, we're gonna have to do a podcast on that sometime.
All right.
Do you know how Newt Rockne died? By the way, do you know?
I don't recall.
I'm gonna tell you after we take this call. I'll tell you how Newt Rockne died.
Okay.
Thomas in Augusta, Georgia, listening on 91.1 FM. Glad to have you, Thomas. Go ahead with your question for Tom.
Yes, I just had a question in regards to the leadership structure of the church. And what is it that prevents women from obtaining leadership positions such as bishop, deacon, and things of that nature?
Now, women can have various leadership positions in the church. They just can't receive holy orders, just to be clear on that. And of course, one of the most powerful, besides the Blessed Mother, whom we spoke about a little earlier, how about Mother Angelica, who, being so influential, here we are on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network, she had a tremendous position of influence. And I think it said something about St. John Paul II that he didn't say, okay, thank you, little lady, for starting this, and now we'll let the boys take over. No, he understood that God was calling this woman, as he called other great women in the history of the church, including Joan of Arc and Therese of Lisieux, and anyway, of Lisieux. And he allowed her and God to work through her in a profound way. But more to the point, your question is that women cannot be priests because priests are called to emulate Christ. Christ is the bridegroom, the church is feminine. So it's neither incidental nor unimportant, as the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith said years ago in the mid-70s regarding why women cannot become priests, because they're not men. And this is not a question of equality or degrading women, but rather that the priest who is emulating Christ and is acting in persona Christi needs to be a man. And this is you could see the tradition of this, and this would be a capital T, but you say in the Old Testament it'd be a smaller T, but even for them it was very serious, that you did not have, for them it would have been a capital T, you always had male priests. So it's always been a male priesthood. And so I remember somebody was in grad school journalism say, oh, so there were no women at the Last Supper, so they don't get to be priests because they didn't get a dinner invitation. I said, well, it's a little more significant than that. This woman was of Jewish heritage, and she being of Jewish heritage, we should know that they've always, as you see going with Aaron and onward in the Levitical priesthood, that it was always men. And this is a particular role that men have been called to fulfill. And since women cannot be bridegrooms, people say, oh, it's that simple. Well, it's profound, because Christ is the bridegroom, the church is his bride, and women cannot act in persona Christi as a bridegroom simply because they are women, which is not to say they are defective per se, but rather that we have equality. But in equality, there could be complementarity, that we can have different gifts without necessarily calling into question one's dignity. And again, as I say, some of the most important people in the history of the church, beginning with the Blessed Mother, have been women and are women. I'm sure Sai can attest to his own thing with his mother, and myself with my mother, that without great mothers, the church would not be the force that she is. And it is great Catholic women as the heart of home who've done so much over the years. And we also have the great women religious, whether it's Mother Angelica or Mother Teresa. So we can still see great leadership roles being taken by women, or St. Catherine of Siena back in the day, in a time when women were not necessarily listened to, but they recognized her holiness. So we can see that the gifts of women are indeed celebrated, but that they cannot serve as priests per se, and therefore they cannot be bishops. And of course, it's interesting, one last comment about the Pope, is that he's known to be the servant of the servants of God. And even though some priests will misuse their service, or a bishop, and use it and historically have used it to aggrandize themselves, that is not what they're called to do. And when they do that, they don't do themselves or the church any favors. In fact, they act counter to the mission. But a priest is called to serve, and as far as acting with regard to the sacraments, and most importantly, the sacrifice of the Mass, where he's acting in persona Christi in that regard, he is acting as the bridegroom, and thus one who emulates him must be a bridegroom, a man who can only be a bridegroom in that sense.
Thomas?
So there you go.
What do you think, Thomas?
Okay, I was just wondering y'all's reasoning.
Okay.
I'm personally an atheist. I find religion very interesting, so I just have certain questions.
Did you say you're an atheist, Thomas?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can look back, Thomas, that you see this in the Old Testament. And I would just encourage you, and God bless you for calling and your interest. And I would always encourage you to pray, say, Lord, if you're real, speak to me on my heart over time, and just pray that periodically. Say, Lord, if you're there, let me know. And I think your openness and your honesty, you're calling in, God will honor that. And I know that might sound odd because you're saying you're an atheist, but I would just encourage you to continue to be open.
Yes, sir.
Thomas,
God bless you, Thomas.
Can I send you a copy of my book about Jesus? Would you be interested in a book about Jesus, or another time?
Personally not, but I thank you.
It's really good, though.
Thank you for the offer there.
It's real. I spelled everything right. We did spell
strange.
Well, I swear we did spell check before we printed it. Like all.
And he's got this sense of humor. He'll make you laugh just like he did now.
I literally cannot give this book away. Literally. We'll take a break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Go forth and preach the good news. It's not just a suggestion. If you want to take more seriously the command of Jesus to share the gospel with those around you, consider joining St. Paul Street Evangelization. It's a grassroots organization that brings the Catholic faith to the streets in a non-confrontational way. Visit our website, www.streetevangelization.com, to learn more. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. It's time to do our part.
This is Conversations with Consequences, where we delve deeper into issues affecting our church, our country, and our core, the family.
As Catholics, we need to be informed, aware, and able to talk through some of the tough topics that we're facing in our culture and in our world. Conversations with Consequences gives us the tools to do so.
It's not enough to pray. We have to be a light for the world.
Conversations with Consequences, this Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. I wrote a book about Jesus to introduce people to Jesus. Just tried to give it to an atheist for free. The atheist won't take it. But it would have done wonders for him, too. He'd have been so happy if he got that book. It's called A Teacher of Strange Things, Who Jesus Was, What He Taught, and Why People Still Follow Him. And the first paragraph starts with a conversation about atheists and what
Can we say that if he wants to call back and give it to a friend that he can?
I don't know. I'm so deeply hurt by. Yeah, I'm sure.
Come on, turn the other cheek, man.
Yeah, right. Now he's going to be. But somebody will call and be like, "Yeah, I'm from the guy that called from Augusta, Georgia, but actually my name is Bill and I live in Memphis, Tennessee." Really, Bill? What's your address?
Yeah, we get multiple people.
888-318-7884 is our number, and you better dial it because Tom Nash is here to answer your questions. If you're Catholic, you're welcome to call. If you're not Catholic, you're welcome to call. If you're Christian, if you're not Christian, you are welcome to call with any question at all. 888-318-7884. And I'm telling you, especially now, because we got all but one line open. All but one line open. So you have a very good chance of getting your question through to Tom if you want to give a call right now. 888-318-7884. Tom, I'm actually going to read you one of the questions that...
You're going to mention Newt Rockney, by the way, if you don't want to forget.
Oh, Newt Rockney. Yeah.
What happened when he died? Was that a joke or serious?
No. He died in a plane crash.
Okay.
Yeah, the plane. This was before they knew quite what would happen to a canvas airplane if it got ice all over it, and the pilot didn't think of this all the way through, and this canvas airplane iced up.
God have mercy.
And they went down, and when they found him in a cornfield, I think, had his rosary in his hand.
Wow.
So if you're going to go with the rosary in your hand. 888-318-7884, the number. You are welcome to call with your questions. Let's go to John in Georgia. Boy, we're really big in Georgia today. I'm really happy about that. He's listening on channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio, EWTN on Sirius XM Satellite Radio. John, thank you very much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Tom Nash.
Yeah, appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
The signal is coming in loud and clear down here in Georgia today. So,
praise God.
I wanted to. I'm a Methodist, or at least officially, I'm a Methodist, and also have been an Episcopal in my life. Went to Catholic high school, married a Catholic girl. So I've I've kind of gotten spread around a little bit on the western side of things. Recently, I have been. I got really interested in the church fathers, and I started reading a lot of the early, trying to read some, the early church fathers, and really, I'm kind of one of these guys that didn't even realize that an Eastern Orthodox church existed until fairly recently, which I feel terrible about. But I've been trying to understand. I've been reading like a book by Callistos Ware, and I'm trying. I'm trying to understand what I don't get from my perspective why the split happened, and I know about the Philoque or Philoque controversy, but from a perspective of let me set the question this way: isn't the Roman Catholic Church more of an innovation, and the Eastern Orthodox Church more of the original true church, simply because the Roman Catholic Church actually it separated itself because of a new approach to things, most notably being that the Pope was considered the prime bishop overall in relation to the other five or the other four bishops. So isn't Roman Catholicism more of an innovation in Christianity than the Orthodox Church? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would charitably say no, and St. Irenaeus, for example, would point out in his Against the Heresies, he points out that the bishops of Rome, and he gives the list of them, and he points out that it is this see, this diocese, this bishopric, of which all in the faithful must agree, because recognizing the primacy that Peter received from our Lord, going back to that he was the one who distinctively received the keys of the kingdom, serving under the King Christ, and therefore are parallel to the Old Covenant, where you had a king, King David, and you had Shebna and Eliakim, for example, who were two of the people who served as prime ministers. We could see it in Isaiah 22, chapter 22, verses 15 to 25. And so we see that he is indeed affirmed, for example, as Ignatius of Antioch, Irenaeus of Lyon, as having of primacy, and that they recognize he lists all the bishops going from Peter forward to his time. This was a guy who was, as the book says, against heresies. And we also go on and say, you could see it at Chalcedon or Chalcedon, depending on how it's pronounced. Peter has spoken through Leo, and the matter is settled. So we see the primacy of Rome, and not, again, this is all going back to Jesus, not because Rome is something per se special, but rather this is the see that Peter took up. Also known, people say, well, Peter didn't go, he says Babylon. Well, Babylon, as anybody knows about Revelation, and Jimmy Akin, speaking of 20 Answers, covers as well in some of his booklets on Bible prophecy and other places where Jimmy has written on these matters, that Babylon is understood as Babylon the Great was Rome at that time, because they were the great persecutor of the church. So it is because of Jesus Christ anointing Peter and giving him that primacy, not because he was necessarily the greatest, but because he is the one who Christ chose. And everything, again, as I say in my book, everything properly understood in Catholicism goes back to Jesus. And so we see actually those Eastern bishops for centuries and centuries, they're being united to Peter and going along with it. And in fact, we see in the East, for example, Saint Athanasius, with the Arian heresy, and there he is. He's saying, "Well, hey, we're East and we're going to go Arian." No, he's in the East, but he's united with Rome, and he sticks with the true church and believing that Jesus Christ is the incarnate Word, true God and true man. So, in fact, the innovation would be the difference in terms of breaking away, and I say this charitably because we have the 7 sacraments in common with our brothers and sisters in Christ who are Eastern Orthodox, and indeed our Eastern Catholic brothers and sisters, showing the universality of the church and the complementarity, the diversity that we have, 20 some rites of the church, and it is showing that we can have a legitimate diversity within the universal church. But that we see that the big difference is not recognizing Rome, and going back to 1054 on forward, is that if you have a first among equals, what you end up having I would say, John, and this is just the reality, is you end up seeing that nationalism, whether it's Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, and that it's divided on nationality, and that there's disunity, for example, between the Greeks and the Romans, the Greeks and the Russians, is because of their nationality, which should not take precedence over their oneness in Christ. And that's a vulnerability when you have national churches, as well as being much more likely to be inclined to racism and things like that. For example, whereas Augustus Tolton, an African priest, was very much welcome in the heart of Catholicism in Rome in the 1800s when he was studying. So if you look at the early church, going with Ignatius of Antioch, as well as, you can see Eusebius as far as the recognition, the affirmation of the primacy of the Pope, going and Peter and his successors, beginning in the Bible, being affirmed by people like Saint Irenaeus of Lyon, and also later on in Chalcedon with the affirmation that Jesus, as Peter has spoken through Leo, that this is an affirmation of the primacy of Rome in terms of teaching.
John, what do you think?
And authority.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's a great answer. I mean, I definitely see what you're saying. I guess the thing that it seems like, though, until 1054 that no one was relying on the specific bishop of Rome to decide things. Everything was done in a consular format. And then in 1054, it was a Roman legate that excommunicated the bishop, which really started that. And then just the last thing is that I totally understand what you say about the Russian and the Greek side of things, the nationalities. But that seems to happen with Pepin and Charlemagne in the West. And so
you can have problems. You can have problems within fighting and infighting among Catholic bishops or Catholics in different countries. No doubt about that. I'm just saying that when you divide it in terms of the fact that we are the Greek Orthodox and they are the Russian Orthodox, because you're dividing it in that regard on nationality. But I would say I would go back and look at the early church and see the affirmation, and like I would say with Irenaeus, with regard to these councils did not have a legitimacy and authority unless the Pope signed off on them. And you see that the Pope is leading. There are various manifestations and affirmations of the Pope's primacy, whether it's at Chalcedon, whether it's at Ephesus, those councils, whether it's again Irenaeus or Ignatius of Lyon. You see that the exercise, the recognition of people outside of the Bishop of Rome recognizing his authority, which goes back and affirms the biblical basis of the papacy, which Peter had that primacy, and we see Peter exercising it. And remember, Jesus is the one, he prays for Peter in Luke 22. Peter, Satan has requested to sift you, right? But I pray, he has sift you all. He goes, but I pray for you in particular, Peter. We don't get this because it's in English, but he prays for Peter in particular, and that your faith be strong, that you will confirm the brethren, and that after you fall. So he's even recognizing, Peter, you're imperfect, but it's me that it's going to make the difference in your life. And so we see that again, Peter is singled out and affirmed in a distinctive way by Jesus, not only with the keys, but also in terms of confirming the brethren and also feeding the lambs in John 21. So we see the primacy of Peter played out in Scripture, and then also in the early church in various ways. We see Peter at the First Council of Jerusalem,
John,
and in other ways.
It seems to me like the questioning is very, very sincere. And with that in mind, I would like to offer you our book from our colleague Joe Heschmeyer called Pope Peter, which is a kind of a defense in 40,000 words of what Tom is saying in just a few words here. Would you be interested? I can send you a copy of the book.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's very gracious of you. I appreciate that.
All right, it's $25. I'm just kidding.
By the way, John, I love your Southern hospitality and graciousness yourself. It reminds me, having lived in Alabama, that Southern hospitality and politeness is.
I really enjoyed talking with John. I hope he'll call again. Thanks, John. We got to go, though. That's the music. So I've been putting him on hold there. Thomas, we get his information. We'll send him Pope Peter, defending the church's most distinctive doctrine. Oh, yes, defending the church's most distinctive doctrine in a time of crisis. That's from Joe Heschmeyer, who I believe is here tomorrow. pretty sure we got Joe on with us. Tom Nash, thanks so much. Just had a great time with you. I always love it when you're on.
Thank you, my brother. It's great to be with you and the listeners, and God bless everyone at Catholic Answers and in across America and the listening world.
And could you just, for one more time, say the name of that shoe store in Canada that you want everybody to go to?
Bioped, one word.
Bioped. It's across the border. Just go over the bridge from Detroit. You'll see it.
All right.
See you tomorrow, God willing, right
God
here
bless.
at Catholic Answers Live.